All right, so Trump just picked Kash Patel as his FBI director. So what I want to do is go through this interview with Sean Ryan, and this will be about a 30-minute video or so, maybe a little bit longer, but it'll allow us to see how he thinks, right? Because I think it's important that we understand how this man thinks and understand what he believes. And the media will probably try to portray this in a different light. So let's get some of the information directly from the source. Let's go to the source material. Let's hear this man talk himself. So without further ado, let's get right into it.
I'd shut down the FBI Hoover building on day one and reopening the next day as a museum of the deep state. And I'd take the 7,000 employees that work in that building and send them across America to chase down criminals. Go be cops. You're cops. Go be cops. Go chase down murderers and rapists and drug dealers and violent offenders. What do you need 7,000 people there for? Same thing with DOJ. What are all these people doing here?
Let's get into the deep state. Because it sounds like that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
What is it?
It is an apolitical entity that operates in government to service itself instead of the American people. And what I mean by that is it's leadership positions across government, whether it's DOJ, FBI, DOD, CIA, whatever, combined with underlying positions that are pretty senior up, who work with mainstream media entities to perpetuate frauds on the American people, to commit government corruption, and to stay in power, and to lie to the American people, and to rob them of the truth. That is the singular purpose of the deep state, because they think once the truth gets out, their corruption is going to be exposed. They might get prosecuted for breaking the law. And once that happens, you have an explosion in D.C.
Well, I want to dig in a little bit more on who exactly is it? I mean, I think Vivek gives a great explanation of what it is, but I'm always curious to hear what everybody else thinks. But it just seems, it seems so well organized to me.
It is. Oh.
So who's at the end of it? Is it a country? Is it U.S. politicians? Is it the World Economic Forum? Like, where it's so well orchestrated, there has to be an organizer.
Okay.
And so who is the organizer?
I don't think that there's one specific organizer. I think there is a group of organizations that have participated in it for a while. The World Economic Forum is a piece of it. Certain politicians are a piece of it. Certain people who become AGs, directors of the FBI, directors of the CIA, et cetera, are a piece of it. And of course, the mainstream media is a big component of it. All of those entities partner up together to take over Washington, D.C. And instead of doing the job for the American people, they come out instead, come up with government boondoggles that pay themselves billions and billions of dollars, or their friends billions and billions of dollars, which is our dollars. And they want to make sure that that keeps going over and over and over again. I'll give you a perfect example. Who cares if you've ever followed Russiagate or any of this other stuff about the deep state? Chris Wray, the director of the FBI, and Rod Rosenstein, the deputy attorney general then of the DOJ, were tasked with helping us at Congress, where I ran the Russiagate investigation, to expose Russiagate. We went to them and said, look, you guys didn't do this. Help us expose it. And they both doubled down. You know what they did? They launched an investigation against me, the senior congressional investigator for Russiagate on the House Intelligence Committee, and 6 other staffers. They used grand jury subpoenas to get my personal information, my banking information, my emails, my cell phone information, everything else. I didn't find out till 5 years later when Google called me and said, hey, our 5-year notification has lapsed. We can now tell you the DOJ surveilled you.
That's kind of crazy when you think about it. So he was put in charge for an investigation, and they basically just played an Uno reverse card on him and then subpoenaed his information. And basically, I mean, you could argue violated his rights or not, but got into all the private details of his life. It's super crazy when you think about it. Let's let him continue.
And we had to turn over documents. So that became that we exploded that into a federal lawsuit that's still ongoing in the DOJ and FBI. But those two guys
I don't know why it's buffering.
What? So Google informed you that you're being surveilled 5 years after the investigation started.
Right.
What I mean, what more did they tell you?
They're not allowed to say anything, but that you can be informed now since it's 5 years later. So as a former national security prosecutor, I know you don't just go to Google. You go to every provider. You go to all the telecoms. You go to the bank. You go to everybody. If you're going to run an investigation, that's what you do. But these two guys who were running the FBI and DOJ sat in a room with the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and lied to our faces. They threatened to investigate us, which was bad enough, right? They actually did it. And then these two guys would get exposed, for Rod Rosenstein specifically, for signing a FISA that was totally bogus. And we've caught Chris Wray lying time and time again as the director of the FBI. Put these guys over here for a second. Gina Haspel, who was the director of the CIA, was London station chief in England when Russiagate kicked off. Under the rule of law in America, if you want the Federal Bureau of Investigation to launch an investigation overseas, you have to get permission from the head intel rep. In England, it's the the station chief. So she allowed Russiagate to occur on British soil, where there was a barroom operation to try to record some nub into spilling the beans on Donald Trump. And they would use that to launch the whole Russiagate offensive. Gina Haspel would later become Trump's CIA director. And then when these guys got out of the administration, do you know where Gina Haspel and Rod Rosenstein work today?
Where?
At Christopher Wray's old law firm as senior named partners, making 7 and 8 figures.
How is this going to get broken up? They seem so deep.
Yeah.
I mean, you just mentioned they're embedded in politics. They're embedded in mainstream media. They're embedded in intelligence agencies. They are former top leadership of the military that's now embedded within the military industrial complex companies. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's how many people are involved in this?
Thousands.
In the deep state.
Thousands.
How would you even begin to dismantle it?
Well, I think the first Trump administration was the beachhead, right? People were just like, you guys are full of it. And we continued to put out the truth. And years later, people are catching up to a lot of that truth, saying, wait a second, you guys weren't lying back then. People being the American public. That's the weapon we need. And you guys weren't lying about impeachment. They literally made up a piece of a phone call to launch a presidential impeachment and then put me in the middle of it by making up a meeting that never occurred. But it sounded dirty at the time. And then when we finally released the transcript, everybody was like, oh, yeah, there was no quid pro quo. Nothing illegal happened here. But the narrative had been out there. Now you have President Trump as a president who was impeached for the first time in however many years. And so they get their narratives, right? They don't necessarily care about the conclusory portion of their mission. They use the mainstream media to say Trump's a Russian asset. He's been impeached. Kash Patel is under DOJ surveillance for...
Same thing that they did, in my opinion, with the felonies. Trump is a manufactured felon, right? If you think about it. So they went back in time, they changed the statute of limitations, they Jimmy rigged these misdemeanors and found a way to try to make them felonies. And since it was in New York and the left controls every aspect of it, they were able to get what they wanted. So when he's talking about them creating the narrative around him being impeached or whatever, they literally did the exact same thing with these felonies. And then they wanted to use that felon label. And they were hoping that that felon label would make him unelectable to the American people. But the problem with that is the American people, most of them did not see that trial as a fair trial. They saw it as a hoax. It was a political witch hunt. That's just the reality of what it was. So the fact that they weaponized the legal system against him destroyed their credibility when calling him a felon.
For whatever investigation when he was never done. I've had more mainstream media hits on me than I can count. But they want the title narrative to carry the day. Hunter Biden's laptop is Russian disinformation. They don't care about the actual truth. And so once you start stacking these together and you
think about that, they don't care about the truth, right? His laptop was misinformation. And how many, when he's talking about the deep state along with social media or legacy media being a part of that, Legacy media was telling you it was Russian disinformation, and most of the social media companies were not allowing that to be shared or spread, even though it came out to not be Russian disinformation. But it doesn't matter because they pushed the narrative.
You show the American public you were lied to. You based your vote at the polls on information that the government purposely withheld from you so that you would vote a particular way. Once you show enough Americans that, then I think you have the movement that you need behind the leadership that we have in Donald Trump, is my position, to take a wrecking ball to the deep state.
How so?
You go to DC and you remove all these positions, right? And you start enacting measures, not of retribution, but of legal consequence. Y'all acted one way. For instance, the people that signed the 51 Intel letter, right? Permanently suspend their security clearances forever. Every one of those guys lied. Caught lying. You're talking about 2 former CIA directors, a former NSA director, and a former Secretary of Defense. All intentionally, to this day, continue to lie and won't take back their letter. Okay, you can stop making money from your security clearance. There's a start. Then you go in and you get the Eric Charmels of the world, who've been publicly outed as utilizing intel to inject a political narrative across mainstream America. And you remove these people from government. You have to go in there. The same thing we're talking about the voting. It's the same thing here. You got to cleanse the scrolls. Government service is a service. We're not making you do it.
Here's what I'm thinking about what he's saying, because the left is going to scream and throw a fit when these people start getting removed, because they seem to like big, overreaching government. Many of them do. So I feel like the left is going to be screaming and hollering a lot when people are getting removed, even though they should be removed. So just kind of prepare yourself for that, because it's likely going to come.
And if you break the rules and regulations, you're out. So that's a big part of it, right? Then you bring in the new bench, the new team. Then you're going to have to keep fighting the media. And I think we're slowly, over the years, have started to win that fight. Because the more and more, this is one thing I learned when I started Russiagate, my name was outed for the first time, that the media is attacking you, the more you're over the target.
Who is at the head of it?
I don't think there's one person or one group. I think it's people who know they're going to benefit from each other if they sign up for the program, let's call it, right? And so, again, not a Republican or Democrat thing. In the glossary of this book, in alphabetical order, I think there's like 65 people I name by title and name, just to show people how expansive the deep state is. And so there is no like one chain of command they report to. Instead, what I believe they do is they bring in people that they can control. Oh, the Obamas still have heavy sway in that entire operation. And so do people that have been around for 10, 20, 30 years in Washington.
I mean, how do you get them out of government? How do you get the deep state out of government?
You deprive them of the opportunity to continue running the deep state, removing their security clearances. The other thing I recommended in my book, and I recommended President Trump too, was you need a 24/7 declassification office, whatever you want to call it. Transparency, truth, whatever, I don't care. Sits in the White House, reports directly to you, and you take incoming from the United States of America. I want JFK. I want the 9/11 files. I want this. I want that. All the FBI, and this is a tool, this is something we didn't cover. What the deep state uses the most to cover up their corruption is an illegal application of the classification system.
Interesting.
Remember the Lovebirds text from, this is a beauty, the Lovebirds text from FBI, DOJ land, Russiagate, Strzok and Page were texting each other. Who they were running the Russiagate investigation against Trump. They were the head of the counterintelligence unit at the FBI, and they're having an extramarital affair together. Can't make this stuff up. They're sending each other texts about how much they hate Trump and are going to create an insurance policy to stop Trump. They finally find those text messages. You know what the FBI and DOJ do for like a year? Redact them.
Crazy.
To congressional investigators and congressional men and women running the oversight of their agency. That's just one example. But it gets even better. Here's the deep state full circle. Just last week, do you know what Strzok and Page received from the Department of Justice?
What?
A $1.5 million payout to settle a lawsuit that Strzok and Page brought for the improper disclosure of their personal text messages on FBI phones. And the DOJ just rewarded them.
On FBI phones.
They broke the law. They broke the chain of command. They broke every regulation there is in the FBI. They weaponized the system of justice against a political target they hated. We found those text messages, and we got them declassified finally in full when I became Deputy Director of National Intelligence. And the world has now seen them, and they can read them. And that's the best form of transparency. That's why I want this 24/7 declassification office. Don't have me regurgitate it to you. Read it. Get the documents, get the files, get the memos. But the deep state...
The thing I like that a lot of the left doesn't do, and people that aren't going to be supporting him in many cases, I don't think they'll be doing, he's saying, go to the source material. We want to make this transparent so you can go to the source material and you can actually see what is being said. He said, don't listen to me. Go read it for yourself. I like that. That is how I think things should be done.
They came full circle and gave these guys a payday for rigging a presidential election and breaking the law.
Think about what he just said. Just think about that for a second. Rewind it if you need to, but think about what he just said. They gave him a payday for what?
So now you know what happens. That's step one. Step two, get America the truth. And that's what that office would be for.
Get America the truth.
I think the only way that the government ever gets confidence in the people again, and I don't think they even give a shit, by the way, but is to hold somebody accountable, hold people accountable for what we've been seeing go on.
You're totally right. The people that are running this deep state don't give a shit because they're so arrogant. They're like, we're never going to get caught. And if we get caught, we're going to get rewarded. Like these guys, like Andy McCabe, who the DOJ rewarded him with his pension after we caught him lying to the FBI investigators while he was the deputy director, leaking to the media improperly. He goes out, we fire him. He gets out of government. He brings a lawsuit, and the DOJ under Joe Biden reinstated his pension in full. So how do you have accountability of stuff like that? Or a Comey, or a Clapper, or Brennan? We haven't even talked about the intel side of stuff. My version of accountability is a little different than maybe what most people would think. I don't have a hit list. I don't have a revenge march I'm on. I want the Constitution.
You don't have a hit list?
I want the Constitution.
I'll give you one.
I'll take it. I simply want the Constitution to be applied to everybody, singularly, in government and outside of government. That's it. I want the judges to stop being political jackals on the bench and participate. We didn't even talk about it, and participate in the deep state prosecutions.
Nothing unreasonable about that. And that's something the media won't show you, right? The media is not going to show you the reality of what he's saying. In many cases, they're going to try to show you something to get you to view him the way they want you to view him. Let's let him continue.
That have weaponized justice. And what I want in terms of full accountability is I want the American people to have enough ammunition of the truth that they are the ones that enact the accountability in Washington, D.C. That is how you see a sea change. I know the people that, guys like me, may take self-fulfillment in seeing that guy or that gal go to prison for breaking the law. But that is not going to fix Washington, D.C.
You don't think so?
Not alone.
You don't think that's an important piece of the puzzle here, is to hold these people accountable, prosecute them, imprison them, maybe more?
It's a piece of it.
And as an example to everybody that's coming after them, if you do this, we're coming for you, and this is what's going to happen.
I agree in full that it's a big piece of it. But it won't fix the next man up behind them unless you can combine that piece with educating America that this is going on writ large.
Got it.
Because you're not going to get everybody, right? But if you get enough Americans in there to get Congress to do what they should be doing, like prosecuting Merrick Garland for breaking a congressional subpoena and violating the law, he can send Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro to prison for violating a congressional subpoena, but he can do it on his own, right? What I want is for people to get Congress to execute the authority they have on instances like this and have him held accountable there. And then I want the DOJ and FBI to be run by the Constitution. I want the intel communities to focus on our overseas threats and our border. I want all of these people that join the ranks of government to respond to the needs of the American people. It might sound pie in the sky, but if you want to fix it, fix it. I give you 50 things to do in here, but if the American people aren't behind you, then you won't have the accountability you really want.
any of the stuff that we're seeing right now, the word treason is thrown out
Yeah.
quite often. Is it actual treason?
For who? For
Fill in the anything, any of the stuff that's going on.
I mean, I think what so many of these guys did, whether it's Brennan, Clapper, Comey, McCabe, Strzok, Barr, Haspel, Esper, what have you, I think there's a lot of rule and law breaking. And I don't know that it ever gets to the level of treason singularly with any of them. But what you have is a buildup of so many actions by the deep state that it becomes borderline treasonous to allow those people and their activities in a collective fashion to ever be applied to the United States.
What is the definition of treason?
It's basically committing an overt act to overthrow your government is treason. So they're not committing overt acts to overthrow our government. What they're doing collectively is committing acts to rig our government and to stock it with people that they want in there, themselves and their acolytes.
What would be the harshest punishment you could see happening to some of these people?
Some of them being prosecuted. I mean, there's nothing harsher than that, right? Your civil liberties are taken away from you and you're sent to prison. It's about as harsh as it gets. We can do the financials. I think we need to do parallel track civil suits and prosecutions for monetary purposes against some of the big wigs in Wall Street and all that stuff that happens up in the financial racket. Insider trading stuff. There needs to be a multitude of things done, but I think the biggest punishment.
What about stuff like what was it, 51 intel agents?
Yeah. Strip their security clearances forever. Remember, every one of these people is in the private sector, and you know this. They use that to get 7- and 8-figure paydays, to get big government contracts, to go for big defense contracting and intelligence firms, right?
I do think holding people accountable is going to be a critical part of this, and disincentivizing people to do it and not letting them make tens of millions of dollars off of these security clearances. I mean, I think that makes sense, right? But again, I think we need to have people who are willing to hold these people accountable, because what these people do is they're willing to hold everybody else accountable while not playing fair, gaming the system, and rigging stuff in their own favor, while acting as if they're morally superior. So we have to have people that are willing to come in and hold these people accountable like he's talking about. And unless we do that, and a big part in doing that, like he's talking about, is having the American people behind it and showing the American people and not letting the media and the left control the narrative to keep the important information away from Americans. So the more transparent we are with this, the more Americans will very likely support what is going on, because they're actually seeing it. If you don't see it and you don't know what's happening, well, why are you going to care? So I think transparency is huge in what they're trying to accomplish. He's making sense.
Who owns their security clearance? The U.S. government. Who pays for it? The U.S. government. So the DNI can come in there on day one and said X, 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 all the way down the line. And they're not the only one.
That seems like a very easy task. Pull these clearances now. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen at a lower level within the agency. Pull that guy's clearance.
Here's the one. Here, look, Trump speaks for Trump. I've recommended that to him. I can tell you that publicly and to your audience. I want him to do that because it's justified. It's not an act of vengeance. They have had the opportunity to recant, and all 51 of them have doubled down and tripled down. So pull him. I think he will, but it will be up to him as a DNI.
I mean, it is legitimately that simple, correct?
Yeah, not to mention the amount of money we'll save. And they're just one example of the 51, right? There's everybody that participated at the FBI in Russiagate. Everybody that participated in at DOJ in Russiagate. All these people have clearances. They all still have clearances. Gone. Same thing at CIA. Same thing at DOD. Same thing at NSA. I mean, the list will be massive. The 51 is just a very public-facing version of it.
What are some of the other ways we could get rid of them in your book? I
think we've talked about like the bulk of the ones I want to do. Personnel. It's the one thing we haven't really discussed. Restocking. I don't consider it restocking. Everybody keeps talking about who's got the black book. You got to go in and fill 4,000 jobs. Why? Who the hell said you have to have 4,000 people come in with you? Why can't it be 1,000? No one's ever given me a good answer for that, except that's the way we do things.
That is a terrible answer. And this is one thing I've learned is when interacting with people, ask them why, right? And if they can't tell you why they're doing it, do they even know why they're doing it? And if they can't tell you why they're doing it, can they even prove to you that that's a good way to do it? Likely no. If it's, well, this is how we've done it, or that's just, what they told me, or this is how we've always done it, and this is the way we're going to do it by God, and yada, yada, yada. Again, there's probably a problem there. There's probably something missing. I would dig deeper into that.
That's the way we do transitions. That's the way the deep state works. Okay, well, that's not really a good answer. And then with you decrease the amount of people in the cog, you've
What's the
preempted
cog? What's
just
cog
the
stand
wheel,
for? Okay.
the whole wheel of government. Instead of having 67 people that can say no and don't want to follow your lawful command, you just have a chain of command that goes from point to point, right? So I think you need way less people. You don't need this massive number. I think that is a fiction of the deep state. Not to mention, again, you save money. Then you need to do a whole bunch of things with personnel. For instance, at FBI, you need to stock it with a director, deputy director, and the heads of the separate divisions. Same thing at CIA and DOD that are going to support. And the media, again, is distorting it already. Trump's going to install loyalists. Kash Patel is a Trump loyalist. What does that even mean? If the guy gives me a lawful chain of command authority, you want me to not execute it? That's unlawful if I violate it. He was the president. If he's the president again, the same thing, should apply. So then we need to decrease what I call government creep with personnel. The FBI's footprint has gotten so freaking big, and the biggest problem the FBI has come out of its intel shops. I'd break that component out of it. I'd shut down the FBI Hoover building on day one and reopening the next day as a museum of the deep state. And I'd take the 7,000 employees that work in that building and send them across America to chase down criminals. Go be cops. You're cops. Go be cops. Go chase down murderers and rapists and drug dealers and violent offenders. What do you need 7,000 people there for? Same thing with DOJ. What are all these people doing here? Looking for their next government promotion, looking for their next fancy government title, looking for their parachute out of government. So while you're bringing in the right people, you also have to shrink government.
So a massive government reform.
Who has Jeffrey Epstein's
Black Book?
black book?
FBI.
Interesting.
Who? That is that. I mean, there's.
That's under direct control of the director of the FBI. Just like the manifesto from the Nashville school shooting
Yes.
of the Catholic school.
Yeah.
We still haven't seen that, right? It's not the Nashville police or PD saying we don't want this out. The FBI airmailed into that operation and said this is not getting out. Because they do that because this is another government gangster operation. All these local law enforcement communities get funding from the DOJ and FBI for
Right.
local programs. And if you don't cooperate, you're not getting your $1 million for this, and you're not getting and that's a lot of money to these local districts. That's how they play the game.
Interesting.
That's why you don't have a black book.
But the black
Super
book,
interesting.
It's not just sitting. I mean, that's Hoover power times 10.
And to me, that's a thing I think President Trump should run on. On day one, roll out the black book. And not just that. On day one, roll out all of the text messaging communications we were told were deleted. On day one, play the rest of the video of the pipe bomber. On day, one of the reforms I talk about in government gangsters is you need a central node to be continuously declassifying. This is another thing they do. They overclassify. And I'm telling
Yes.
you, as the former number 2 in the IC, they overclassify 50% of the stuff there to protect the deep state. Oh, no, you can't see that. Nothing to see here. Gina was a master at it, of doing it.
Think about that. He's saying they're overclassifying stuff to protect many of the things they're doing that they don't want the public to know that would be damaging to them, damaging to their goals, or damaging to what they're trying to accomplish, right? So that's really interesting to think about, that they're weaponizing. I don't know about weaponizing, but I guess you could say they're utilizing that classification system to protect themselves, and there's no one that's really able to hold them accountable because they're the ones who classify and declassify it. So In that same way, I think one of the reasons Trump is picking this man as his director of FBI is to completely take a wrecking ball to what they're calling the deep state and how it operates, which will allow Americans to save more money and ultimately allow the government to be far, far, far more transparent and productive than it is currently, while also having a lot less people serving themselves at the expense of the American people.
And we still haven't seen half of the Russiagate report that we wrote. Still under lock and key. On how the ICA was originally constructed. We put 10,000 man hours against John Brennan's team that did it. And we found out why they came up with their bogus conclusions. But we couldn't sell it to the world because we couldn't talk about it, and the government gangsters came in and buried it. All of these things, there needs to be a continuing central power, whether it's the White House or offsite, that says every request that comes in, just right out the door, as long as it's not a major threat to national security.
You know, it's the same thing with Epstein's list. It's like, what the hell are these Republicans doing? Oh,
I saw you
give out the list.
I saw you make news this morning about that. I got to get to that.
Yeah.
You say that the FBI has Epstein's list. They're sitting on it. That doesn't seem like something you should do. You're protecting the world's foremost predator. That seems like an evil thing to do, regardless of who may be embarrassed in the release of that list. Why is the FBI protecting the greatest pederast, the largest scale pederast in human history?
Simple, because of who's on that list. You don't think that Bill Gates is lobbying Congress night and day to prevent the disclosure of that list? And then when we go back to DOJ and FBI, we still don't have all the list, all the FISAs, all of the stuff they did to 275,000 Americans illegally in 1 year. Put that out there. I'm not saying put in the recipe on how to do it. We can keep the hood on the engine, but we can show the American people how they violated our rights. And to me, what you said is the most important: restoring trust in our agencies and departments. That's the way to do that, is not to get a piñata and just punch them mercilessly and hoping for some bubble gum to pop out. The way to do that is to literally give the American people the truth. And that's what they feared about Donald Trump. He's going to come in there and maybe give him the Epstein list and maybe give him the P. Diddy list. You know, he's going to come up there and maybe do all these things, and they are terrified.
Yes, they are terrified. And I think that's one thing I've been noticing about this incoming administration. There's been a lot of talk about transparency, right? Department of Government Efficiency. You can see that Trump is putting people in the proper places to dismantle what's the better way to put it? I guess you could say the deep state, the lack of transparency, the ambiguity, all these things. He's putting people in place to make our country more productive, make our government more productive, but also while decreasing our government's footsteps, protecting our rights more. I mean, overall, it's just really interesting to see the people he's putting in place, while also seeing how many of these people interact when seeing how these people are put in place. I think a lot of people are scared right now, and probably for good reason. So that's all I got for this video. Like, share, and subscribe. I will see y'all in the next one. Y'all have a wonderful day. Peace.